Hello, welcome. Now let us talk about developing the total compensation strategy and the 4 steps that are involved in doing so. Keep in mind that while the 4 steps are simple, executing them can be very complex. There's usually a trial and error time environment for the learning curve in gaining that experience in terms of what works. In the insights that you gain as a result of trial and error and experience helps you obviously adapt and adjust and make revisions to close the loop, or at least to redesign the final version that you gain the most benefit from. So evidence of research can be very helpful, not only from your own company, but also in the industry and from academic research. Of course, there are some specific steps that you can follow to create your compensation strategy. So number 1, assess your total compensation implications. That would be your business strategy and competitive dynamics, your HR strategy, your cultural, your values, your social and political context in a given city or given country, the employee union needs, and other HR systems that you are able to use. In second, have a map of the total compensation strategy for your organization. The mapping of total compensation strategy means looking at your objectives, the alignment, competitiveness, contributions, and management, all of that together, and how it can be implemented, which leads to your strategy for implementation, where you have to consider the design system to translate your strategy into action every single day, every single week, every single month, and choose relevant techniques to fit the strategy into the implementation process. And finally, you got the reassessment or evaluation and learning points, where you realign as conditions change and realign as strategy changes for your organization. If we think about human resource management being a partner with the senior executives of the organization overall to achieve the mission, then obviously as the organization's mission and vision changes because of the external or internal dynamics in the economy, then human resources department, the compensation strategy has to be adapted to that and change accordingly. In any case, in designing a total compensation strategy, the first step is to assess the total compensation implications. In other words, you understand the business. So this first step includes understanding the specific industry in which the company operates and how your specific company or organization plans to compete in that industry. In other words, what business should we be in and how do we win in this specific business? You learn to gauge the underlying dynamics in the business, or you build relationship with those who actually can. In different compensation strategies should align with different business strategies. Competitive dynamics can be assessed globally. However, comparing pay among countries can be very complex and sometimes maybe impossible. Nonetheless, as managers, it's very important that you become knowledgeable about competitive conditions locally, nationally, and hopefully internationally as well. In terms of HR strategy, keep in mind that pay can be used as a supporting player or as a catalyst for change. Whatever the overall HR strategy, a decision about the prominence of pay is that HR strategy is required. Pay can be a supporting player, as in the high performance approach, or it can take the lead and be a catalyst for change. Whatever the role, compensation is embedded in the total HR approach. With regards to culture and values, a pay system tends to reflect the values that guide a company's behaviors and underlie their treatment of the employees. A pay system tends to mirror a company's image and overall reputation. We also need to keep in mind the social and political context. In context refers to the wide range of factors like the legal and regulatory requirements, the cultural differences, the changing workforce demographics, and overall employee expectations in a given environment. So these also affect compensation choices. Because governments are major stakeholders in determining compensation, lobbying to influence laws and regulations can also be part of the compensation strategy. So from a strategic perspective, compensation managers shape the socio-political environment, as well as the fact that they're being shaped by those socio-political forces and factors. With regards to employee preferences, keep in mind that employees have different needs and different wants, which are at times overlooked when formulating a compensation strategy. So a major challenge in the design of the next generation of pay systems is how to better satisfy individual needs and preferences of employees. And offering more choice is basically one approach. But you have to reflect on the fact that whether offering more choice is good or not, or maybe. Well, contemporary pay systems in the US at least do offer some choices, including flexible benefits and choices among healthcare plans. So some studies have found that people do not always choose well, and they do not always understand the alternatives, and too many choices simply confuse workers. In addition to possibly confusing employees, unlimited choice would be a challenge to design and manage by HR professionals in any human resource department. Unlimited choice may also meet with disapproval from the U.S. Internal Revenue Services, because keep in mind health benefits are not viewed by the IRS as income. There are also union preferences, because pay strategies need to be adapted to the nature of the union membership relationship or the collective bargain agreement that you as managers have with the union representatives or labor representatives. Although we should mention that union membership among private sector workers in the US is less than 7%, unions do influence pay decisions. However, unions' interests tend to differ, and compensation deals with unions can be very time-consuming and sometimes costly to change. Step 2 of the total compensation strategy is to map a total compensation strategy. A compensation strategy is usually formulated based on 5 elements of the pay model: the objectives, the 4 policy choices of alignment, competitiveness, contribution, and management. So mapping is often used in marketing to clarify and communicate a product's overall identity. Let us look at the mapping of compensation strategies of Microsoft and SAS. Each company's profile on the strategy map reflects their main message or their pay brand. For Microsoft, the total compensation is prominent with a strong emphasis on market competitiveness, individual accomplishment, and performance-based returns. On the other hand, for SAS, total compensation tends to support work-life balance for their employees. Also, the competitive market position, company-wide success sharing, and egalitarianism are their hallmark. Strategic maps provide a visual reference for the eye so we can see more easily. They're very useful to analyze compensation strategy that can be more clearly understood by all employees and more specifically by managers. Maps do not tell you which strategy is best, but instead they only provide a framework and some guidance for us. It is important to realize that the decisions in the pay model work in concert altogether. It is the totality of the decisions that tend to form the overall compensation strategy for an organization. Steps 3 and 4 discuss implementation in the reassessment for continuous improvement purposes. So in step 3, the goal is to implement the strategy through the design and execution of the compensation system. The compensation system translates strategy into practice and into people's bank accounts. In step 4, reassesses and realigns as necessary to close the loop. This 4th step recognizes that the compensation strategy must change to fit changing conditions in a given company or industry. Therefore, periodic assessment is always needed to continuously learn, to continuously adapt, and to continuously improve your overall compensation strategy to make sure you get the behaviors and outcomes that are necessary for your company to survive and retain a competitive advantage over time. Okay, so now let us talk about the sources of competitive advantage, more specifically the 3 tests that your textbook talks about. So these 3 tests determine whether a pay strategy is a source of competitive advantage. First question is our pay strategy aligned? Does it differentiate us? Does it add value? In terms of alignment of the pay strategy includes 3 different aspects also. Alignment with the business strategy, alignment externally with the economic and socio-political conditions, and aligning internally with the overall human resources strategy or system. Alignment is probably the easiest test to pass for any organization. Now we move into the second test, which is the differentiation. So some people believe that the only thing that really matters about a strategy is how it is different from everyone else's in the market. If the pay system is relatively simple for any particular company, then competitors will easily copy it. So if others are able to copy it, then how can it possibly be a source of competitive advantage? At least it won't be a sustainable competitive advantage. So the answer, according to the advocates of the strategic approach, is in how the pay system is actually managed. The MAP profile research show how Microsoft and SAS differ in their strategies. One company uses pay as a strong signal, and the other uses pay to support its work-family balance HR strategy. Both Microsoft and SAS claim to value performance, yet their compensation strategies do differ. Keep in mind, it's difficult for a company to imitate the compensation strategy of another company since each strategy is woven into the fabric of the company's overall HR strategy. Copying one or another dimension of a strategy means ripping apart the overall approach and patching in a new one. So, in a sense, the alignment test or weaving the fabric helps ensure passing the differentiation test. The third test, or add value test, means compensation is often the company's largest controllable expense. So how does our compensation add value to the overall organization's competitive advantage? And since many consultants and some researchers treat different forms of pay as investments, the task is to come up with ways to calculate your company's return on those investments. Trying to measure a company's return on investment for any compensation strategy does imply that people are human capital, which is a view that some people find dehumanizing actually. They argue that viewing pay as an investment with measurable returns tend to diminish the importance of treating employees fairly. Of the 3 tests of strategy, align, differentiate, and add value, perhaps adding value is the most difficult to pass. You have to ask yourself this question: are there advantages to an innovative compensation strategy, something that is new, something that is different from everybody else? Well, keep in mind that in products and services, the first movers or the innovators have well-recognized advantages that can offset the risk involved. High margins, market share, and mind share. Mind share basically means the brand recognition of your company, your product, as being innovators. So that by itself can be very valuable for a corporation. However, it's not yet proved whether such advantages accrue to innovators in total compensation, though. Let us reflect upon best practices in best fit for a little bit. The premise of any strategic perspective is that if managers align pay decisions with the organization's strategy and values, and they are responsive to employees in union relations, and they're globally competitive, that the organization is more likely to achieve a competitive advantage that can be sustainable. However, in contrast to the notion of strategic fit, some people believe that a set of best pay practices do exist, and that these practices can be applied universally across situations. So rather than having a better fit between business strategy and compensation plans that yield better performance, people say that best practices result in better performance with almost any business strategy. Many believe that adopting best pay practices allows the company to gain preferential access to superior employees. And these superior employees will in turn be the organization's source of competitive advantage. So do you believe that superior employees can be a source of competitive advantage for a company if other systems are not aligned and not necessarily encouraging high motivation and high levels of satisfaction, and these people do not necessarily want to work in this company? Well, if you are getting superior employees, chances are they also have many options to leave the organization and join others. So we have to make sure there's a fit, obviously, between attracting these superior employees and offering them a work environment and compensation packages that suit their specific needs. In the virtuous and vicious cycle, you're concerned about many variables. In A, you can see that the organization's performance is increasing on the rise. So the culture of ownership in the organization where you're offering stock options, let's say, is going to perhaps have a positive influence on the risk-return balance. So the pay for performance might be very useful, as you've seen in many organizations that are discussed in literature. On the other hand, in the vicious cycle B graph here, you can see that the performance of the organization is somewhat decreasing. If you do have this ownership culture to, let's say, stock options or pay for performance, the risk return might be somewhat imbalanced. So consider the consequences of this based on where the organization is and how it aligns with your overall compensation strategy with regards to pay for performance. With regards to virtuous and vicious cycles, keep in mind that perhaps it's not how much you pay your employees, but how you pay your employees that do matter. Performance-based pay works best when there is success to share among everyone. Performance-based pay that shares success with employees does improve employee attitudes, their behaviors and performance when coupled with other high performance practices. When organization performance declines, though, performance-based pay plans do not pay off. There are no bonuses, and the value of stock declines with potentially negative effects on performance of the organization. Unless the increased risks are offset by larger returns, the risk-return imbalance will reinforce declining employee attitudes and speed the downward spiral. Overall, keep in mind that performance-based pay may be a best practice under the right conditions. In summary, if we were to contrast the essential differences between best fit and best practice perspectives, we can say that the best fit strategic approach proposes that pay programs in combination with other HR programs should be based on unique characteristics of the company its employees, and its external environment. Also, if the pay system reflects the organization's strategy and values, and if the organization is responsive to employees and union relationships, and it is globally competitive, then the company is more likely to achieve a sustainable competitive advantage. The company's compensation strategy should support the achievement of the company's mission, vision, objectives, and strategies, and the better the fit, the greater the competitive advantage and the more sustainable that advantage would be. The best practices approach suggests that certain pay practices and programs are superior, regardless of the company's internal or external conditions. So best practices are not necessarily linked to the organization's strategy. These best practices have been proven in certain companies, and efforts should be spent on disseminating them throughout the workplace. Therefore, adapting best pay practices do allow a company to gain preferential access to superior human resources talent. This talent in return would influence the strategy that the company adopts, which will then be a source of competitive advantage. If we were to reflect on a debate about non-financial returns being more important than pay, what do you think? You agree with that or not? Are non-financial returns more important than pay? In terms of arguments against this proposal of non-financial returns being more important than pay, is that money or pay is the fundamental motivator of work performance for most employees, if not all. The basic performance of the pay for performance and ESOP systems were designed to motivate employees using pay. The success of these systems showed that pay takes higher precedence over the non-financial returns in motivating employees to work. What is interesting is that there has been a shift in ideology, with higher pay being the only incentive for a person's career. There has been a trend of switching employers for higher pay, which has actually increased over the recent years. So this is one of the major reasons for high attrition in some companies. Evidence suggests that the trend of doing an MBA, for example, especially an executive MBA, is attributed to higher financial returns from the degree itself. In other words, being a master of business should hopefully result in higher pay as well. On the other hand, in arguments in favor of this topic, basically means we can say that pay, when it is used as the only motivating factor, prompts employees to put in just the minimum performance that is required to get the next raise or to promotion, or to just simply be employed and not get terminated or fired during layoffs or during normal performance appraisals of the employees. Evidence supports that affective and cognitive aspects such as job satisfaction, motivation, and innovation as being furthered by non-financial returns attributable to a person's job. Emotional, mental, and physical well-being have taken on a vast role in career decision-making, and is supported by major companies around the world that strive to provide necessary facilities that move beyond the scope of just pay. Commitment toward one's job, also supported by research evidence, seems to decrease without elements of relational returns, though. So relational returns is a value add that employees look toward when pay for performance or other accepted forms of pay are on par with the industry standards. Essentially, the quality of work-life balance is stressed upon by employees that are seeking to further their career in a fulfilling manner. A conclusion to this debate would be a neutral stand where pay and non-financial returns are equally important to motivate people to work, although in slightly different propositions depending on the individual and working conditions. Research on motivating factors has revealed mixed results. However, employees are motivated to work based on pay. We know that. But while employees are motivated to work based on pay, they put in extraordinary effort only when they're provided non-financial returns as well. That's why we have to pay people on par with the market and then offer relational benefits, which hopefully energizes people to go above and beyond the norm. In short, pay makes employees work, and non-financial returns make them perform in an extraordinary manner. I guess that's the way we could put it. So good luck paying your people well in providing them non-financial returns that makes them extraordinary employees that create high performance for themselves, for your department, and for your organization. Good luck. So hopefully whenever you have an opportunity in your company's human resources department to be involved with the compensation strategies, you hopefully are able to integrate some of these strategic choices into your organization's overall total compensation package. This way your employees will be happy and you will be able to not only recruit top talent, but also retain them in a productive manner for your organization. Good luck. As always, try to cite your textbooks as academic sources for everything you write and reflect upon, and then rely on some recently published in classic journal articles in academia that tend to support your view, or at least theoretically they're making a point, and then you can relate them to the modern practices. Good luck.